I'm Carla DeSantis Black. I was the founder of Rocker Girl magazine and the Rocker Girl music conferences. Rocker Girl was a magazine for and about women in music that was published 52 issues from 1994 through 2005. And it was the only magazine that really was for players. In 1994, I had noticed after many years of spending time with women in music and also being a musician myself, that there was this big thing about women finally getting into music, which I thought was bizarre because in the 80s my influences were the Go-Go's, Susie and the Banshees, the Motels, Heart, and in my opinion there had always been women playing music, but all of a sudden mainstream media decided that women were finally getting into music, and I thought this is really bizarre. And having been a musician, ironically, I saw a cover of Rolling Stone with Liz Phair in a slip. And when I was reading the inside of Rolling Stone, all of the questions that the various women were asked were about their perfume choices versus their music. And I started getting a little upset. And then I went to the newsstand and was looking at other magazines, and I noticed that women were barely mentioned in them. And when they were, it was like there was always some kind of a condescending comment, or there was, Natalie Merchant was referred to as looking like a little librarian, or there would always be talk about who the woman had been dating or going out with, or that she was a mom, and then the music was always not even second or third, it was fourth, fifth, or sixth. And I found that really upsetting, and I thought, if I were a 16-year-old girl and I were reading this, I would be discouraged and not realize I could play music, because the Go-Go's were so instrumental for me in playing music. I saw them and I went, wow. And I think I go back to the 60s when the Beatles did Ed Sullivan, and every boy in America said, wow, that's what I want to do. So you don't realize that it's even a possibility unless you see other people doing it. The problem today for me is that mostly we see girls maybe strumming a guitar, but there's always men in the band. And that's not necessarily a problem unless you want to be something other than a singer. There are not a lot of women drummers that we can talk about and say these are current players that are really well known. I mean, Kid Rock has a female drummer. She's been in the band since the inception of the band. But there aren't a lot of women that we look at and go, wow, I want to be like whatever. Friends of mine own a drum school in Seattle, and after the White Stripes came out, all of a sudden their enrollment of girls who wanted to take drum lessons just surged. So I really believe we need to see more women in the mainstream, and there's nothing wrong with singers, it's just out of balance in comparison to everything else. There's not really a famous woman known as a guitar player for being a guitar player. Taylor Swift plays her guitar, but we don't really think of her as being a guitar player as much as we think of her as being, a spokesperson for CoverGirl. So while there's nothing wrong with any of those images or archetypes, I think that we still go back to two archetypes, which is either really strong, kind of tough, Joan Jett, don't mess with me, or really pretty and feminine with, flowing hair like Taylor Swift. And I think most of us fall someplace in the middle. And I think a lot of girls feel like they're not, the only way that they can play music is, number one, if somebody writes the songs for them, or if some father figure is pulling the strings. So it's important to me that women and girls start getting a little bit more opportunity in the music business, that they have more opportunities as producers, because once that happens, the novelty factor will go away. And I'm a little bit old now to be talking about it's still a novelty. When I started out, it was the early 80s, and we're still having these conversations. So we'll really have made a difference once we see more, and that becomes commonplace and not such a novelty. To me, what will really be a great day is when we don't really need to separate women, and when women are just part of the conversation and not outside of the conversation.